Black Lives Matter. In 2020, the United States and much of the world witnessed one of the largest mass movements in modern history. On May 25, in Minneapolis, the loss of George Floyd's life while being restrained by police was recorded on video and spread globally. Within days, the slogans "I can't breathe" and "Black Lives Matter" echoed everywhere, turning outrage into a wave of demonstrations across more than 2,000 cities in all 50 U.S. states and in dozens of other countries. This spark did not arise from nowhere. It was fueled by a long history of injustice faced by the Black community, from Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, and Michael Brown to Breonna Taylor. The COVID-19 pandemic, which disproportionately affected communities of color, along with an already polarized political climate, made the death of George Floyd a breaking point. From Minneapolis, the movement spread to New York, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., and many other cities. Images of tens of thousands of people of different races and generations marching together became defining moments. Most demonstrations were peaceful, marked by symbolic actions such as kneeling, raising fists, and collective marches. Yet in some areas, unrest escalated into arson and clashes with law enforcement, prompting curfews in many cities and the deployment of the National Guard. The world watched closely. The movement quickly became the center of international media coverage. Major corporations declared support for racial justice and pledged billions of dollars to equality initiatives. Some U.S. cities moved swiftly to enact reforms, banning chokeholds, tightening rules on the use of force, and passing Breonna's law to end no-knock warrants. At the same time, American public opinion was deeply divided, especially around the slogan, "Defund the Police," which reflected the nation's political and social polarization. The long-term influence of Black Lives Matter is undeniable. It placed racial justice and police reform at the core of the national agenda. Investigations into policing practices expanded, and the conviction of Derek Chauvin, the officer directly responsible for George Floyd's death, set an important legal precedent. The movement also shaped the 2020 election and energized a generation of young voters passionate about equality and reform. It demonstrated that public mobilization can drive policy changes while also revealing the limits of reform at the federal level amid partisan divisions. In cultural and historical terms, Black Lives Matter has been recognized as a defining civil rights movement of the 21st century. The slogan, "I can't breathe," murals commemorating George Floyd, and Black Lives Matter Plaza in front of the White House have all become lasting symbols preserved in museums, art, and educational materials. Worldwide, street art and new forms of memorialization have deepened the collective memory. For this reason, 2020 is remembered as a historical turning point, a moment of awakening that affirmed solidarity and the pursuit of equality in a diverse society. Argentine crisis. The Argentine crisis of late 2001 erupted amid a prolonged economic downturn, triggering massive demonstrations in Buenos Aires and across the provinces. The climax came on December 19 and 20, when 39 people lost their lives and President Fernando de la Rúa was forced to resign, plunging the country into chaos, as 5 presidents took office in just 2 weeks. An extraordinary event in global political history. The roots of the crisis lay in the policy of pegging the peso to the US dollar during the 1990s. At first, it helped contain inflation, but over time, it eroded competitiveness and made the country heavily dependent on international borrowing. By 1998, recession had set in, public debt soared, unemployment neared 20%, and IMF-imposed austerity measures further deepened public disillusionment with a political class already discredited by corruption. The slogan, "Que se vayan todos," they all must go, echoed throughout the nation, reflecting widespread rejection of traditional politics. In December 2001, the government introduced the Corralito policy, freezing bank deposits, which enraged the middle class. Protests known as cacerolazos, banging pots and pans, erupted everywhere, alongside looting of supermarkets in poorer areas. The declaration of martial law on December 19 only drew tens of thousands more into Plaza de Mayo. Intense clashes on December 20 resulted in dozens of deaths and thousands detained. That night, President de la Rúa resigned and departed the Casa Rosada by helicopter. an image that became symbolic of his government's collapse. Within the final 14 days of 2001, Argentina cycled through 5 presidents. On December 23, interim leader Adolfo Rodriguez Sá declared a default on $93 billion in debt, the largest sovereign default in the world at that time. The succeeding administration abandoned the peso-dollar peg, causing the currency to lose about 70% of its value, inflation to surge, and GDP to fall an additional 11% in 2002. More than half the population slipped into poverty, and unemployment surpassed 25%. The 2001 crisis shattered confidence in traditional politics, paving the way for the rise of Kirchnerism, a left-leaning populist movement that emphasized the role of the state in the economy. At the same time, grassroots social movements left a lasting imprint. Neighborhood assemblies, barter networks, and worker-run factories all embodied a spirit of direct democracy and community solidarity. The key lesson was the fragility of an economic model overly dependent on international finance and rigid exchange rates, as well as the need for flexible policies tied to social protection. 2001 remains etched in Argentina's collective memory as a historic turning point. It has been portrayed in journalism, academic studies, documentaries such as Memoria del Saqueo by filmmaker Pino Solanas, and protest songs like El Ángel de la Bicicleta. The crisis also inspired works of cinema, photography, and music, capturing both the pain and the yearning for change within society. For historians, it marked the end of Argentina's neoliberal era and stands as a striking example of popular power unleashed when trust in institutions collapses. Brazil. In June 2013, Brazil witnessed its largest wave of street demonstrations since 1992. Sparked in São Paulo and Rio de Janeiro by a 20-centavo increase in bus and metro fares, the protests quickly spread to more than 100 cities. On some nights, participation reached into the millions, turning the June Journeys, Jornadas de Junho, into a political and social turning point for the country. The fare hike was the trigger, but behind it lay deep-seated frustration. Public services were weak, transportation overcrowded, healthcare and education deteriorating, while inequality and corruption were rampant. Many Brazilians felt they were paying taxes like a rich country, but receiving services like a poor one. At the same time, the government was spending billions on the 2014 World Cup and the 2016 Olympics, building FIFA-standard stadiums and displacing residents in sharp contrast to underfunded schools and hospitals. The slogan, "It's not just about 20 cents, captured the broader nature of the discontent. Initially organized by the free fare movement, Movimento Passe Livre, the marches escalated after June 13, when police used tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse crowds, fueling public outrage. On June 17, hundreds of thousands marched nationwide. By the night of June 20, the movement reached its peak, with the iconic image of demonstrators climbing onto the roof of Congress in Brasilia. Participants came from diverse backgrounds: middle-class youth, workers, and many first-time protesters. Social media functioned as an organizing tool, spreading messages quickly. Most daytime rallies were peaceful, but at night, more radical groups, such as Black Blocs, appeared, leading to scattered clashes. Under pressure, state and city governments were forced to cancel the fare hikes. Congress rejected the PEC 37 bill to preserve prosecutors' power to investigate corruption, while pledging to allocate more oil revenues to education and healthcare and to increase legislative transparency. Even so, police crackdowns resulted in casualties and arrests. The approval ratings of President Dilma Rousseff and the political establishment plummeted, exposing a crisis of confidence in the system. The 2013 protests opened a cycle of prolonged instability. Brazil's economy slid into recession, followed by anti-corruption demonstrations in 2015-2016, ultimately leading to the impeachment of President Rousseff and a major political shift. The immense grassroots energy of the June Journeys later fragmented, with parts of the movement co-opted by other forces, illustrating the limits of leaderless mobilization with diffuse demands. Yet, it also marked the awakening of civic consciousness and the vibrancy of civil society. The key lesson was that economic growth alone cannot substitute for fairness, transparency, and quality public services. The Brazilian Spring Primavera Brasileira has since entered collective memory with enduring symbols. Guy Fawkes masks, green and yellow flags, the slogan, Não é por 20 centavos, the protest song, Vem pra Rua, and the rise of citizen media like Media Ninja, alongside documentaries such as June the Month That Shook Brazil. For historians, 2013 is viewed as a pivotal year. It ended the illusion of a Brazilian miracle and ushered in a new era in which society and the state were forced to renegotiate representation, accountability, and public welfare.